Dear Rabbi Weiss, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and with youths and educators around the world who are trying to advance the consciousness of the oneness of humanity. Rabbi Weiss, you lost your grandparents in Auschwitz, as well as several of your aunts and uncles. You could have become fearful of the other, but instead you dedicated your life to the cause of peace. More specifically, you have been courageously and tirelessly working to show that peace is possible, even between those who the dominant voices insist to portray as irreconcilable enemies. In spite of the resistance, criticism, and personal attacks you have faced, you have, through historical inquiry, the study of the Jewish holy texts, and building ties of friendship with the so-called enemy, shown us that Jews and Muslims have been friends, have lived peacefully together, and can continue to do so as long as they follow the holy traditions of their sacred books. You mentioned that you are constantly disparaged and belittled for trying to make peace with the Arabs, but that even when we are dealing with a potential enemy, we are supposed to approach them with dialogue, because aggression is never an effective solution. Besides your activism and teaching, you also pray and hope every day for the coming of the Messiah, a day, you explain to us, when all humanity will be united and live in peace and harmony. Rabbi Weiss, could you share with us how your upbringing has shaped your belief in extending solidarity to every human being, regardless of their origin, background, and beliefs?
Yeah, so first, with the help of the Almighty, I pray to the Almighty to bestow upon me His truth, His wisdom, that I may be worthy of conveying His message, and so sanctify His name and bring peace to the world, inshallah, with God's help. Amen. I think that with God's help, we have to understand that the whole concept, the whole narrative that we have as if we're doing with enemies when we're speaking about the Muslim and Arab people. First of all, that's totally not the case. That is the Zionist narrative, where they try to put down a few facts and build on those facts, and then they'll argue with you about how you should approach the issue today because of facts that are facts. But it happens to be the facts, they're the ones who created out of thin air facts that are not there. And that's malicious. It's with intent. And that is where the problem lies with God's help. So first of all, we have to understand we're not dealing with enemies in our case at all. When we're dealing with the rift, the terrible quagmire, the Nakba, what they would call this catastrophe, what we're dealing in Palestine, this has nothing to do with Jews and their enemies. That's vile, that's repugnant and repulsive, and that is why we're witnessing today the genocide, the murder daily, and the oppression, where people are standing on the streets and crying from hunger and pain and suffering in Gaza, and the world is not responding, unfortunately, because they've dehumanized these people, as if, like I say, that there is a hate and there's things, these people are anti-Semitic and all. It's all false. It's all false. But just getting back to my history, my upbringing, thank God, was that I was brought up as my father, as you mentioned correctly. My father was in Hungary. My father, blessed memory, was in Hungary. And when the Nazis invaded Hungary, he escaped. His parents were killed in Auschwitz, as the majority of my father's family. My mother's family was mostly from Poland, also almost entirely wiped out by the Nazis. But my father was a very religious person, as my mother, and I was brought up in a very religious family and a religious community. And our community was brought up with the basics of our teaching, which is Torah. And our Torah is not nationalism. Our Torah is to serve God. And therefore, all the concepts that I do and that you are lauding me about, thank God, I mean, it's not my greatness. It's simply with voicing the words of our teaching of the Torah, which is one of the words says, Mahu rachum afata terachum. Just as God is compassionate, you should be compassionate. Our Judaism is to be subservient to God. It's 3,000-year-old religion, to be subservient to God. And part of that is to emulate God, as God is compassionate, and there's commandments that deal with between us and God. Just God created the world 6 days, the seventh day rested, so we have to keep the Sabbath, which, by the way, Zion, the state of Israel, runs freely on the Sabbath. It will be a Tuesday, so they don't uphold the words of the Torah. Although they use the Star of David and they call themselves a Jewish state, it's full of hypocrisy and falsehood. So it's not a Jewish state. They're using the facade of Judaism, but Judaism is subservience to God. Judaism tells us, the religion, that we should be, first of all, loyal citizens in every country we reside, pray for the well-being of the country we are, show gratitude to people who have done good to us. Our history is replete and shows that the Jewish people, when we were being truly oppressed in Europe, because they tried to convert us to Christianity, and the Jews were burnt at the stake and so forth, and the Inquisition and so forth. And it was through history that we Jews were taken into the Muslim lands, and we were embraced, and we flourished in every single Muslim land. That's not to say there were never bumps in the road. In every land, different people, and there were bumps in the road. Everything is from God. It's a whole issue by itself to understand why God created the concept of anti-Semitism and so forth, to remind us to return, to repent, like it says in the Torah. God sends punishments, whether it's a tsunami, anti-Semitism, whether it's a plague, whatever it may be. It's to remind people always that we're not here permanently. We're here for a purpose, and we should be introspective on our deeds. Are we being kind to everybody? We're doing what the Torah requires of us. That's Judaism. And Judaism tells us to show gratitude for the countries that embraced us. And it was the Muslim and Arab countries that took us in, including in the Ottoman Empire, which includes Palestine, and we lived together for hundreds and hundreds of years in peace and tranquility. We were able to serve God and put out our greatest leaders and so forth. I grew up, and as I say, my parents got married in the United States. I was born in amongst these community of immigrants. They were from Europe, and we were taught what Judaism is, and we were taught also that Zionism was a movement that strayed from Judaism, that is actually a transformation to nationalism. They ignore totally the words of the Torah. For their convenience sake, they picked Palestine to be their homeland, and they had a technical problem that it was inhabited by a people, and therefore they had to make a narrative that the people that were there were actually anti-Semitic and they hated the Jews, and therefore that is the problem why they don't want to let the Jewish people take over and make disappear over 500 villages and towns. So it's not it's not a surprise that you will find that the very religious communities, whether it is Mea Shearim in Jerusalem or here in the United States, in New York, right across from Manhattan, the largest concentration of religious Jews, where they give their lives to serve God and to try to be that that picture of a Jew that we want to be, to show the world of people that are serving God, that are emulating God, that are doing kindness and so forth. That these people don't have an Israeli flag flying in the whole communities over there. Even though we pay for kosher, we pay for private education, we give our lives for our religion, and if it would be critical for the Jewish people to have the state, they would be the first to fly the flag. Yet they don't have the flag there, as they don't have in England, in Stamford Hills, where there's a very large Jewish religious community, in London, or you go anywhere, same thing in Montreal. The very religious community invariably, and including, as I said, in Mea Shearim in Jerusalem, the very religious communities are opposed to the existence of this creation called the Zionist State of Israel, that is occupying another people. This is forbidden for us. So that is why we stand with this view, and we don't have a problem. We don't have an enemy. On the contrary, we have people that were our friends that are now unjustly suffering under a movement that is masquerading and using the name of our religion to justify their occupation. We are obligated, because of our religion, because it is being done in our name, to stand up and state and tell and educate for the world that these are not our enemies. It happens to be, you're right, though, even by the case of Hitler, our rabbis, the ones of the Jewish community, stated that the approach, just as in the Bible, anybody can look in the Bible, it says Jacob went to his brother Esau, who wanted to murder him, and he brought him presents. And he went and he embraced him. And the Torah tells us that this is the way the Torah teaches us that we should live our lives throughout our exilic existence, that if we are being oppressed by a people, we should approach them, we should try to pacify, to placate them, and try to bring peace. And that is the approach of Judaism. People may scorn us and say, hey, you're going to let that bully punch you? You're going to show who's strong. I'm not going to let myself. Never again, never again. These words, never again, and all this is a Zionist talking point, and it's just to show that I'm not going to let myself. But that's not the Jewish approach. The Jewish approach is just the contrary. Even though Jacob had God to back him, but God told him the way is to be humble, to go to the other person and say, what is the problem? What is the issue? In the case of the Arabs and Muslims, we're not dealing on the contrary. These are our friends, were our protectors. But even in a case where there would be enemies, the approach is just the opposite of the Zionist approach. It would be to placate and to befriend and to try to do what we can. But again, I have to stress, this is not what we're dealing with today. We're dealing with a simple evil that is taking the land away from the Palestinian people, and we are crying right now and hurting with the people of Gaza. It is beyond words. It's satanic, because I can't use the terminology, because it's beyond this worldly sense of what evil that is being perpetrated against the people of Gaza. And I mean, just go out one day into yesterday when it was humid and wet and hot. You can't stand outside. And they're living there, first of all, in occupied Palestine, in the refugee camps, and in Gaza, with squalid water and not proper food and so forth, for tens and tens of years. Now we turn to the last 8 months or so, where they're being bombed. I mean, we know as Jews, we know what that means. It's not that long ago in our history. It's people are still alive who remember what it means to be hunted for day in and day out for 5 years or so, the time of the Holocaust. They don't know when they go to sleep if they're going to wake up in the morning. They don't, and as you know, I don't have to waste precious time. It's not wasting precious time, but everybody's watching this live. What is happening to the people of Gaza? They're crying and suffering, and we should be running there to the borders with water and food and saving them. The world should be doing that. That's what we should be doing. So I'm sorry for being speaking it so long, but that's basically it.
Thank you. That was wonderful. And what do you think is the source of your hope and courage to publicly express this universal solidarity, even in the face of criticism and opposition or apathy?
Well, again, as I said, our sources, we believe that there is an Almighty who created the world. He is almighty, he is all just, he is all compassionate. He gave us a Torah. The Torah is, we believe, from God, contrary to what people said that Moses made, and you can pick and choose what you want from it. It's totally a godly thing. In this godly issue, it tells us that how to one should be, human beings should act together and live together in peace and show gratitude and not wrong another person and so forth. That's the source of everything. And if you stick to that rule, We're not out here trying to convert people. A person could become Jewish, but we're not. On the contrary, we discourage people from becoming Jews because we believe God created every human being, created the world, and we believe that every human being has to believe God gave Moses the Torah, where it states you have to keep 7 commandments: believe in God, not worship idol, not kill, not steal, not commit adultery, to have a court system in every land that you're existing, not eat from an animal while it's still shaking, while it's still alive. The 7 commandments to know, and if one upholds these laws, then they will inherit the world to come. That's basics of Judaism. One doesn't have to be Jewish to serve God. And Abraham had his friends who were not Jewish and so forth. I mean, that's the way we're supposed to live together in peace. And we did. That's why our history we were able to live in the Arab and Muslim countries. Even the Arabs and Muslims were scholars, also contrary to always the scorning and the belittling and the dismissing of the Muslim communities. But they were full of scholars. They were scholarly communities, and they knew exactly what our Jewish teaching is, and they took in the Jews for a reason, because they understood that we're not a threat, because we're not aspiring or contemplating or wanting to take over a piece of land. We simply want to serve God. We have a distinctly different approach in serving God, but that's not an impediment to coexistence. So we were always able to live together in all these countries in peace and harmony. And as a Jew, he always knows. I give an example. When you go with a Jewish family, you'll watch them. They go, and the mother takes the child into the store, and the kid starts making noise, or maybe will take something, a candy. So she'll say, "That's a chilul Hashem. You are desecrating God's name." She'll say, she'll have to say, "You're stealing" or something. She'll say, you be quiet. And what did you just do? You desecrated God's name. Because the first issue is, we understand that our lives are here, the body to serve the soul to serve God, to bring respect to God, to our purpose of living and to doing the commandments is to sanctify God's name. And if God forbids a Jew and that's the law books, if a Jew is going to do something criminal or do something wrong or not act properly, then he's desecrating God's name, because he mirrors what a person who's serving God. So the mother's going to say to that little child, you're making a chilul Hashem, you're desecrating God's name. And that's what we're brought up, that to understand that one should be godly. That's what the concept is. So that brings us that we should feel for the people who are suffering in Gaza, that we should be outspoken. The chief rabbi of Palestine, Rabbi Teitelbaum, nothing to do with the Zionist rabbinate and their chief rabbis, which is a farce. They made a state. They used the Star of David, even though it's totally contradictory to Judaism. We're not allowed to kill. We're not allowed to steal. We're not allowed to have a Jewish sovereignty since the destruction of the temple 2,000 years ago. We have to show gratitude, done good for us. They do just the opposite. So it's totally contradictory to Judaism. So they use the name Israel because they wanted that they should get backing in the world. They made a rabbinate, and they have a chief rabbi who runs around and gives it this aura of legitimacy, that doing something by God. But it's all false. And we had a rabbinate in Palestine, and we had a chief rabbi who moved away from Israel in the 1950s. And I said, lived in the United States for many years, like 30, 40 years, with the name chief rabbi of Palestine, and kept on urging the Jewish people to go out and tell the world that what's being done in our name is not Judaism. And we are totally, we are humiliated by what is being done. So we teach our children, we say it's a terrible crime. That's what's happening to the people of Palestine and Gaza, and there is no reason whatsoever that we shouldn't be able to live together in harmony. And the Torah is on the contrary, because the more religious you are, the more reason that you should be able to coexist with your neighbors in peace and harmony. It's a simple, it's logical, and that's all.
Thank you. And how do you think the youth can remain hopeful and practice the courage to extend solidarity to every human being in their daily lives?
I didn't hear that well. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. How do you think that the youth can remain hopeful and practice the courage to extend solidarity to everyone in their daily lives?
Well, again, we look to God when it was just a terrible COVID and so forth, right? Our hope and always is that, again, God is compassionate, God is good, God is always wants to good. We don't understand things. We don't understand why an old person dies, which people takes for granted. That's okay. I mean, so we don't understand the ways of God, but we know that there's a system for God's world. That's why when somebody, God forbid, passes away, a close relative, we make a blessing. Blessed is the righteous judge, because we don't question the Almighty. We know that we always have to be introspective, try to better ourselves, and do what's proper, and things, and God ultimately rewards for good, and and God punishes for bad. So there's a way, there's a system. So our hopes is always, but that we try to do what's proper, serve God properly, and that will bring for peace and tranquility in the world. And that's what we strive to do. And we find that, I mean, in that we are, our hopes, instead of becoming depressed, if one believes that there's a God who's ruling the world, and you don't question God, and then you can feel, you put your burden to God, and then you can live a life of happiness, and and instead of nervousness and fear, you can live with tranquility. It says holy people are always tranquil, and they feel, because they don't question it and not fearful. They just, you do your thing. So if you're doing what's proper, you're stealing, you're not doing it. On the contrary, you're constantly looking to do kindness to other people and doing what godliness, and in our case, to not to be silent against this colossal, that's this communal crime of what's being done in the name of Judaism, the occupation of a people, a whole, like there's a person has his personal issues, and then there's this communal issue, which is being done in the name of the religion of Judaism, and the people of Palestine, the people of Gaza, and we dare not be silent. We really, really have to be standing up and to correct this injustice, and plead with the leaders not to be intimidated, not to be fearful of being labeled anti-Semitic. We're not going to say it won't happen. People, professors, and professors are losing their tenures. Students are being labeled constantly as anti-Semitic, which is, in truth, this is an insult to common intelligence, that God blessed every human being, because everybody will understand if you would just sit down for a minute and understand. Look at the history. We lived together prior to Zionism. We lived together for hundreds of years without any human rights. Judaism is a concept, and my grandparents, they died because they were Jews. And now to come along, and when you watch some people simply taking the land of another and doing this injustice in total and opposition to the words of the rabbinical authorities around the world. They all stood in opposition to Zionism, including the chief rabbis of Palestine, which in the United Nations documents pleaded with the United Nations. Rabbi Dushinsky said, we furthermore wish to express our definite opposition to a Jewish state in any part of Palestine. And if you go till today, you will go to Palestine, you go to Jerusalem, you go to these communities, you'll see the very religious are opposed to Zion. And just think about, just for a moment, they just gave a decree, the Supreme Court, that the very religious has to go to court, and they're talking about, what's going to happen is there's going to be large demonstrations. It's going to pull. Now think for a second. You made a Jewish state. Why is it that the very religious aren't part of your army? What's going on here? So use common sense. Something is wrong. The whole thing is weird, is crazy. It doesn't make sense. Because it doesn't make sense, because it's false. They're simply using the identity of another people. They're using the identity of Judaism with the backing of the Western government, of the Western world, and they've created a concept ersatz Judaism, an alternative Judaism. And with this, they're intimidating. You speak up against them, you're labeled anti-Semitic. They have to put through laws and declare that a donkey is an elephant. They're declaring that if you're opposing Zionism, you're opposing Judaism. The fact that these two contradictory concepts, that doesn't matter, but you're doing that, and dare you to speak up against that, you're going to lose your job. This is what we're dealing with here. We're watching people dying. It would be like a comedy. It would be a nice comedy to put up if it wouldn't be so tragic. We're watching people being murdered day by day, people's dying, children, that if you would be sitting in your home and you would hear a kid in your next room, you wouldn't be able to sit by your computer and write. You couldn't concentrate. You couldn't do anything. And here we're watching, and people are hearing children screaming, children crying, women, men, and I mean, every family has its tragedies that are beyond words. And we're watching this, and the world is silent and declaring that they're inhumane. That's the only reason you can accept why logic allows it, because you dehumanize these people by calling them that they do not accept people of another religion of Judaism. They're anti-Semitic and they're evil. I mean, why? Where does this come from? It's just simply like closing the switch to common sense. It's an insult to logic, to common sense, and we have to be standing up and really doing what God wants of us and speaking up. What can I say?
And how do you think educators can help young people develop a sense of belonging to one human family?
Well, I'm not going to be presumptuous, we speak in our Jewish communities where it's, I turn to, the Torah, which is totally, it's God's compassion, God's logic, and therefore it's all righteous. And we train our children with this education, which ultimately should ideally, I mean, there's always, of course, people who stray, but it should bring them to do just and to be able, as we've seen for thousands of years, that we were always able to live in communities, in all the communities around the world, in harmony. Besides, when anti-Semitism came along, again, anti-Semitism doesn't mean when somebody goes in and breaks somebody's windows and he happens to be Jewish, the guy who did it, and you say, what are you doing? And he says, hey, you hate me, you're angry at me because I'm a Jew. That's not what we're talking about. We're like the Zionism is doing. But I mean, we always, as Jewish people, lived around the world in every community, and we were respected because we were trying to do above and beyond, understanding that people has a nature. Some people get angry fast. Some people don't have that much compassion, but we're taught to work on oneself, to emulate God, to be what's proper. And therefore, our communities were always able to coexist with other people. Now, to be able to tell other communities, professors, how they should train people to overcome every human frailties, that human beings, each one has their own frailties. A person who denies he has frailties is simply is a stupid, basically. We all have our frailties and we have to work on that. For professors to be able to teach that, what can I say? It's hard to say, especially when I don't want to get off on a tangent, but today education used to be in the ages that people went, played in the streets, had fun, and they went to school for education. And they were limited to these, they had their life of eating, drinking, playing, and going to school, trying to get higher education. Everybody looked up at a professor, and if somebody was a professor who did evil, would lose their jobs. So you had a certain system of bringing to a person knowledge combined with ethics. Today, everybody's being taught, programmed by their smartphone and the videos, movies, things where you look up at somebody who happens to be a very successful gangster or something, who's doing evil, who's corrupt, but as long as he's successful, he's good looking, and and so forth and so on. What the television trains a person, so the mind gets twisted. You can't think straight. A soldier, in order to become a soldier, I think, as what I've been told, is they take them, a lot of times they take them out in the field and they say, kill, kill, kill. They give them a bayonet and they stick. They train them to dehumanize the person. He should be numb to the godly feelings that one has, and the training that they get. They should be totally switched into another program to be able to perpetrate, what would be considered evil, but here it's justified for a war or so forth. When people are given these, a smartphone, and they watch these very exciting movies and all these things, their mind are being programmed in a whole different tangent, in a different program, that evil could be condoned and so forth. And that's where it's a big problem. It's not. It's instead of the field that education was integral with compassion, with doing good and so forth. It's already it's dissected. It's being divided into just, you can have education and go to university and so forth, and yet at the same time your mind will be on a different program of not good. So I don't know what to say, but I would still urge everybody, there is one God, and to pray to God that He should be to give us. God is the same God that was before computers, and so it's the same, and it's His universe, that He should give us the heart and the soul. We say in our prayers on the Rosh Hashanah, on the Holy Day prayers, we say God should give into the hearts of leaders, kings and leaders, that they should strive for peace and justice and so forth. We say that in our prayers. It's one of the main prayers we say. So we can cancel over. So therefore, if we urge everybody to do what you can. At the same time, pray to God. There is one God, and then pray to Him that He should give this world the heart, an open heart, to strive to do good and to be able to live in harmony and and tranquility and peace, and to strive to do good one to another. And we are rewarded by God for that. You do good, God rewards the people who do good. And we see it's not only Jewish communities. We see the city of Nineveh, in the story of Jonah. It wasn't a Jewish king, and the prophet didn't want to go. He said, I'm going to go and I'm going to tell them to do good. That's a whole story, if you know the story. And then he said, and they're going to do the repent, and the punishment is not going to come. They're going to say, it wasn't even true what he said, because the punishment didn't come. In other words, if they'll do good, then what God said, threatened to do, a punishment won't come. So then they'll say the prophet was just, it never happened, the punishment. So they will never know that it's true. What the prophet says, that you should do good. So, but it is a fact, there is no Almighty who rewards for good and punishes for bad. If the professors and so forth will train together with their education of whether it's mathematics or medicine, at the same time well, medicine is automatically like that, but to talk about compassion, to integrate that a person should be a human. He should be what we call humanity, we call godliness, that it shouldn't be just an education of a certain issue. It should be integral. It should be integrated with a striving to accomplish on this world good and coexistence and peace. Then we will, with God's help, and to pray to God that it should be successful, then we will, with God's help, earn the rewards of having peace and tranquility.
Yeah, Rabbi Weiss, thank you so much. I had listened to many of your presentations, but every time we learn something new. Thank you so much. It was
Thank you.
wonderful spending this half an hour with you.
Yeah, and feel free to call us and spread our word, and especially to the people of the middle of Gaza, Rafah, and the refugee camps in Palestine, that we are crying and hurting with them, and letting the Muslim people know that we are not the ones that are vilifying them, and we want to live together in peace, inshallah.